Hello, busy bees. This is Miss Lay. I'm going to be reading chapter 11 of Serafina and the Twisted Staff. Chapter 11. Serafina suspected that the murder investigator was the second man in the carriage. It appeared that she didn't need to look for him because he was looking for her. She thought, too, that he must have been the stranger she'd seen with Mr. Vanderbilt earlier that morning. But no matter who he was, getting interrogated by the police couldn't be a good thing. What was she going to say when he asked about Mr. Thorne's disappearance? Oh, him. Yeah, I remember him. I led him into a trap by my mother's den, and my allies killed him. Do you want me to show you where it all happened? As she headed up the narrow, unlit back stairway toward the main floor, it felt like her head was filling with more thoughts than her mind could hold. It was 5:30 in the afternoon. She had half an hour to spy on the house and gather clues before she had to report for the interrogation. But she ran into an immediate problem. The young maid who had stared at her earlier was waiting for her at the top of the stairs, blocking her path. Serafina stopped and narrowed her eyes at her. What do you want? When the girl stepped forward, Serafina stepped back warily. I need to talk to you, miss. Serafina did not reply. Begging your pardon, miss, the maid said, but you don't want to go up there looking like that. This is the way I look, Serafina said fiercely as she gazed steadily at the girl. I mean your dress, miss, the girl said. It's the only one I have, Serafina said. The maid nodded, seeming to understand. Then let me lend you something. My day off dress or my Sunday dress, anything, But not this, Serafina said, gesturing toward the burlap sack she was wearing. I ain't heard nothing but good things about your pa, the maid said sheepishly. People say he can fix just about anything round here. But begging your pardon, miss, I think we can agree that he ain't no dressmaker. Serafina smiled. She was absolutely right about that. And you're going to help me? She asked tentatively. If you want me to, the girl said, smiling a little. What's your name? Serafina asked. I'm Essie Walker. I'm Serafina. The girl who brought the children back, Essie said, nodding. She already knew who she was and seemed pleased to meet her. Serafina smiled and nodded in return. TGWB TCB wasn't quite as catchy as CRC, but she liked it. As she looked at Essie more closely, it seemed to her that she had a gentle face, without any deceit or guile, and a warm, friendly smile. Where do your people bury, Essie? Serafina asked, which was how she'd heard her pa ask other mountain folk where they were from. I don't rightly know, Essie said. My ma and pa passed away when I was but 1 or 2. My nanny and papa raised me for a while, out on a farm up Madison County way, per nigh Walnut. But when they passed, I didn't have nowhere to go. Mrs. Vanderbilt heard about me and took me in and gave me a bed to sleep in. I told her I wanted to make myself useful. You're pretty young for being a maid at Biltmore, Serafina said. Youngest maid ever, Essie said, smiling proudly. Come on, let's go. We'll get you sorted out. Essie reached for Serafina's hand, but Serafina reflexively pulled away, snapping her whole body back before Essie was even close to touching her. Essie caught her breath, startled by Serafina's quick movement. You're a mite skittish, aren't you? Essie said. I'm sorry, Serafina said, embarrassed. It's all right, Essie said. We've all got something that spooks us, right? But come on, time's a-ticking. Essie turned and bolted up the stairs. Serafina followed easily right behind her. The two of them ran up 3 flights, then darted through a small doorway that led to a back corridor, then up another stairway to the 4th floor. Essie led them down a tight passage that ran beneath the north tower, past a cluster of maids' rooms, around a corner, down 6 steps, and through the main servant hall, where 3 maids and a house girl were gathered around the fireplace on their break. Don't pay us no mind, Essie called as she and Serafina ran through the room. They dashed down a long, narrow corridor with a Gothic arched ceiling wedged between the steep angle of the mansion's slanted rooftop. There were 21 rooms on the 4th floor for the maids and other female servants, and Essie's room was the 3rd on the right. We'll duck in here, miss, Essie said as Serafina followed her in. During her nightly prowl, Serafina had sometimes snuck into one of the maids' rooms. when the maids went down the hall to the water closet, so she had seen the clean, plainly finished rooms before. But Essie had made up her rooms a simple white metal bed with soft pillows and an autumn quilt. To Serafina, it looked like a perfect warm spot for curling up in the late afternoon sun. But she had a feeling Essie didn't get much time for napping. A clump of wrinkled clothing lay across the splint reed chair. Two of the drawers on the chestnut dresser were pulled out, and there was water left over in the basin on the washstand. "Pardon the mess, miss," Essie said, quickly picking up the underclothing from the floor and pushing the dresser drawers shut. "Lord protect me if Mr. King comes up for an inspection this afternoon, but 5 o'clock comes awful early some mornings. Wasn't thinking on company when I left." "It's all right," Seraphina said. "You should see where I sleep. I was all blurry-eyed this morning on account of I stayed up with that awful Mr. Scrooge," Essie said, as she moved the clothes off the chair. Hearing these words, Seraphina's ears perked right up. Who was this evil Mr. Scrooge? But then she saw a copy of A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens on Essie's nightstand, piled with some Asheville newspapers, a Bible, and a scrap of what looked like Mrs. King's weekly work schedule. Seraphina realized with a bit of shock that Christmas was only a week away. The tan leather-bound book with the gold leaf lettering on the front looked suspiciously like the same edition of A Christmas Carol that Seraphina had borrowed from Mr. Vanderbilt's collection the year before. So I'm not the only one who steals Mr. Vanderbilt's books, Seraphina thought with a smile. Across Essie's dresser lay all manner of feminine accoutrements: hairbrushes, hairpins, little tins of ointment, and a glass bottle of Essie's lemon scent, which Seraphina could smell from a country mile. The room's cream-colored walls were cluttered with scraps of Essie's sketches of flowers and fall leaves. Seraphina knew that she should be doing her job, creeping through the shadows and spying on Biltmore's guests, or at least worrying about the interrogation that was minutes away, but she could not resist the temptation of seeing a little bit of Biltmore up close in a way she never had before. In the center of the room's walls was mounted a single Edison light bulb. Seraphina's pa had told her with a swell in his chest that Mr. V was friends with Mr. Thomas Edison and liked using all the latest scientific advancements. Seeing all this amazed Seraphina. Essie had her own light bulb. Seraphina knew from her pa that many of the mountain folk of western North Carolina were living in clapboard shacks and log cabins without electricity, central heating, or indoor plumbing. Many of them had never even seen a light bulb, let alone have one for their own particular use. But Essie had made herself a cozy little den up here on the fourth floor, like a tiny mouse nestled up in the attic, where no one would ever find her. A window set into the room's roof-slanted wall provided something that Seraphina, a denizen of the basement, seldom beheld from this height: a mesmerizing westward view across the Blue Ridge Mountains. The clear sight of Mount Pisgah, rising in the distance above the other peaks, caught her eye. A few nights after she and Braden had defeated the man in the black cloak, they had snuck up onto the rooftop to celebrate their victory. She remembered sitting under the stars with him, looking across the mountains, as Braden explained how that peak was more than 19 miles away, but it was still on the estate. He had marveled at how it took a day to get there on horseback, following twisting, rocky trails through the mountains, but a hawk soaring on the wind could simply tilt its wing and be there in just a moment. Smiling, Seraphina turned and looked around Essie's room as Essie watched her with interest. "I ain't got it too bad, do I, miss?" "Not too bad at all," Seraphina agreed. "I like it here." Essie pulled a nicely made beige day dress off one of the hooks of the wall. "It's my Sunday best," she said, handing it over to Seraphina. "It ain't nothing fancy compared to what the ladies wear, but—" "Thank you, Essie," Seraphina said, gently taking it from her. "It's perfect." Essie kept talking as she turned around so Seraphina could change. "I'm a chambermaid now, but I'm fixin' on being a lady's maid some day," Essie said. "Maybe serve the lady guests when they come, or even Mrs. Vanderbilt herself. Do you know Mrs. V?" "Yes," Seraphina said as she pulled off her burlap dress. Goosebumps rose up on her bare legs and arms, half chill and half nervousness. It felt so odd to be undressing when there was someone else in the room. "I thought you must know her. You being you and all, Essie continued. The fact was that Serafina had become very fond of Mrs. Vanderbilt over the last few weeks and had enjoyed their talks together, but she hadn't seen her around the house in several days. My friend's been a going to the girls' school Mrs. V set up, learning how to do her numbers and weave fabric on the loom, Essie said. Mrs. V wants all the girls to get some kind of education so that they can fend for themselves if they have to. I think she's very kind, Serafina agreed, as she tried to figure out how to get on the dress. It seemed to have a bewildering array of buttons and drawstrings and other complications. Kind as kind can be, Essie continued. Did you hear about the dairy boy? 2 weeks ago, a dairyman and his eldest boy got awful puny, real bad sick, like to die. So Mrs. V went on over to their cabin with a basket of food to help the family get through for a while. When she saw the boy was on the down go, she had the menfolk haul him into her carriage, and she carted him all the way to the hospital in Asheville. What happened to the boy? Serafina asked as she finally figured out how to slip into the dress and fasten up the last of the buttons. He's still mighty sick, Essie said, but I hear they're taking good care of him down there. You can turn around now, Serafina said. Oh, miss, Essie said, that's a whole heap better. Believe me. Come on over to the mirror and take a look while I fix your hair. Essie didn't seem to care that Serafina was different from everyone else, that her face was scratched, her eyes too large, and the angle of her cheeks unusually severe. She just went straight to work. This hair of yours, she said, and started tugging away at it like it was a bushel of misbehaving ferrets. We ain't got time for me to do a proper job, but we'll get it wrangled up. As Essie worked, Serafina found herself looking into the mirror and noticed something odd. There appeared to be a uh, there appeared to be chunks of long black hair growing among the rest that she'd never seen before. What's wrong, miss? Essie said, seeing her frown. My hair is brown, not black, she said, mystified as she raised her hand slowly up to her head and touched the black strands. You want 'em gone, miss? I used to cut my mamma's gray hairs out all the time. They'd come in all long and wiry like. They'd drunk too much moonshine, and we'd cut 'em out quick as they came. Just yank 'em, Serafina said. That's gonna hurt, miss. That's a lot of 'em. Just grab 'em hard and yank 'em out, Serafina insisted. If she didn't have enough problems going to the main floor for all to see, now she had strange things growing out of her head. She looked hideous. Essie selected the strands of black hair and pulled so hard that it tugged Serafina's head back. Oh, sorry, miss, Essie said. Keep going, she said. As Essie worked, Serafina decided to ask a question about what she'd seen earlier that morning. You said you're fixin' to be a lady's maid? Have you served the new girl who's been visiting? The English girl? Essie groaned, making it pretty clear she was none too keen on her. You don't like her? Serafina asked, amused. I don't trust that girl any further than I can throw her, coming in here with all her fancy high and mighty airs and putting a bead on the young master first thing. Serafina wasn't sure exactly what that meant, but it occurred to her that someone in Essie's position, working in the rooms on the second and third floors, might see things that she herself did not. What about the murder investigator who came in last night? She asked. Have you seen him? Not yet, but I heard from one of the footmen that he had all sorts of trunks and cases hauled up to his room, filled with strange instruments of some kind. He's been giving all of the servants orders, demanding this and that. That doesn't sound good, Serafina thought. Having yanked out several chunks of black strands, Essie picked up her brush and started brushing Serafina's hair in long, pulling strokes. It felt so strange, but so oddly pleasant to have someone pull a brush through her hair. The sensation of the drag on her roots and the detangling of her hair, and the gentle rake of the soft bristles against her scalp. She had to do everything she could to keep from purring. Can I ask you a question, miss? Essie asked as she brushed. You know, Mrs. King keeps telling all us girls to mind our own business, but everyone's been talking about it all at the same time. We all want to know what's going on. Going on with what? Serafina asked uncertainly. With Mrs. V, Essie said. She didn't come out of her room for breakfast this morning, and she's been feeling so poorly lately that we hardly see her. I'm sure she'll get through it, whatever it is, but I was just wondering if you've heard anything. I didn't realize she was down sick, Serafina said, as a knot formed slowly in her stomach. That explained why she hadn't seen her. She's been sick as a dog some days. Essie continued. Then other times she perks up for a while. We seen the doctor a comin' and goin'. We all just want to know if she's going to be all right. I honestly don't know, Essie. I'm sorry, Serafina said. The news that Mrs. Vanderbilt was sick hung heavy in her heart. But when I hear something, I'll be sure to tell you. I'd be much obliged, Essie said, nodding, and I'll do likewise. Finally, Essie set down the hairbrush. She took Serafina's hair in her hands, wrapped it around, and rolled it up into a looped twist on her head. Then she fastened it all in place. There you go, miss, Essie said. I think that will do you for a little while. When Serafina looked in the mirror, she saw a new girl staring back at her. Her own face was still there, still looking back at herself, but with the dress Essie had lent her and her hair pulled up, she almost looked presentable. Essie smiled, proud of her handiwork. You're a right proper girl now, she said, nodding with satisfaction. Well, I think I am, Serafina said in astonishment. Serafina turned toward Essie, and remembering how she had recoiled from her touch when they first met on the stairs, she reached out and slowly put her hand on Essie's arm like she had seen other people do sometimes. The gesture felt unnatural to her to actually be touching someone in this way, and she wasn't sure if it was the right kind of moment for it, but when she did, Essie's face glowed with happiness. "Aw, miss, it ain't nothin', just helpin' out another girl, is all." "I truly appreciate it, Essie," Serafina said. Then Serafina paused and decided to ask one more question before she went. "A little bit ago, you said everybody got something that spooks them. I think that's about right, don't you? It sounded like you were thinking about something in particular. For you, is it the fear of getting sick like the dairyman's boy?" "No, miss." "Then what is it? What spooks you?" "Well, I ain't too keen on haints, of course. Don't suppose anyone is. People coming back from the dead and all that. But what sends me a running are the stories my papa used to tell around the fire at night to scare us little ones." "About what?" "Oh, you know how when a wind kicks up on a calm day and blows something over, or you find an animal dead in the woods for no good reason, people always say, 'It's just the old man of the forest playing his tricks again.'" Serafina bit her lip, felt her lips getting dry as she listened to Essie's story. She could hear the fear creeping into the girl's voice. "What old man?" Serafina asked. "I'm sure you've heard the stories, same as me. An old man with a walking stick wandering the shadows of the forest, drifting in and out of the mist, leading folk off the road and getting them lost in the swamps. Sometimes they say he causes mischief around the cabin, curdled milk and dead chickens in the yard. My papa used to love telling stories, but them ones scared me half to death. Still do, truth be told." "But who is the old man in the stories? Where'd he come from? What's he want?" Serafina asked, mystified. Essie shook her head and shrugged. "Knock me cold if I know," she laughed. "It's just some old stupid story. But for some reason it scares the living daylights out of me like nothing else. If I find myself out in the woods at night and hear the break of a stick or gust of a wind, half time I just run on home as fast as I can. I'm so bad awful scared of the dark. It ain't even funny. That's why I love it here." "Here? Why?" Serafina asked, unable to fathom the mysterious connection. "Indoor plumbing," Essie said, laughing. "Ain't got to go out to the outhouse every night in the dark." Serafina smiled. Her new companion was a daytime girl through and through, but there was something about Essie Walker that she was growing mighty fond of. "But truly, Miss," Essie said, turning more serious, "you've got to get going back downstairs, and I got to get back to work. If we stay holed up in here like a couple of treed coons much longer, they're going to send the dogs out for us." "The dogs?" Serafina said in alarm. "You know, the bloodhounds, the coon dogs. It's just an expression." "Oh, yes, of course," Serafina said, realizing that, like Essie, there was maybe more than a few things in the world that spooked her. As Serafina said goodbye, she was sorry to go, especially to what awaited her downstairs, but she was glad to have made a new friend.